In 1962, the Venezuelan minister at the time, the foreign minister, repudiated the award by saying that Venezuela regarded the award as null and void. And consequently, since its independence, Guyana has been engaged in an exercise of trying to persuade Venezuela actually to provide meaningful evidence of the contention underlying the claim. And so at this point in time, that evidence has not, up to this point in time, that evidence has not been provided. In Guyana's view, the gap between the two countries had widened. It had widened, not only by way of the extent of the Venezuelan claim, but also by now going beyond the claim to the land territories, but also to some dimension on the maritime side, which in our view also infringed the UNCLOS treaty. We've also asked the court to confirm that Guyana enjoys full sovereignty over the Esequibo and that Venezuela enjoys full sovereignty over the territory west of the Esequibo region, and that Venezuela shall immediately withdraw from and cease its occupation of the eastern half of the island of Ankoko, and that each and every other territory which is recognized as Guyana's sovereign territory in accordance with the 1899 award. The court was also asked to ensure that Venezuela, or to call upon Venezuela to refrain from threatening or using force against any person and or company licensed by Guyana to engage in economic or commercial activity in Guyana, in Guyanese territory, as determined by the 1899 award, or in any maritime areas pertinent to such territory over which Guyana has sovereignty or exercises sovereign rights, and shall not interfere with any Guyanese or Guyanese authorized activity in those areas. Finally, the court was asked to ensure that to confirm that Venezuela is internationally responsible for its violations of Guyana's sovereignty and sovereign rights, and for all injuries suffered by Venezuela as a consequence. In a few weeks' time, and more specifically on June 30th, we, that is Guyana, will be given an opportunity to plead our case based on the magnanimous decision of the court to go ahead with the case, despite the current global crisis. We are grateful for this opportunity. It is an opportunity to which we have looked forward for decades. A favorable decision by the court would be of tremendous benefit to Guyana. Guyana has suffered tremendously over the years at the hands of Venezuela from acts of intimidation, threats of military action, incursions into our sovereignty, into our sovereign territory, and the stymieing of our economic development. The court's decision will promote stability and investor confidence in Guyana. We don't know how long they will take. We assume, in keeping with the precedents of other cases considered by the court, that this ought to be no longer than a few months. We would hope that it wouldn't take us very far into 2020. But that's not a decision for us. The 1905 effort was an effort successful to demarcate the boundary defined by the, or to set out. And I'm using language here which perhaps doesn't meet with the approval of the lawyers, but to map the boundary Guyana's boundaries to the west with Venezuela, and it was an exercise that involved representatives of the British government, the colony of British Guyana and its officials, as well as the Venezuelan government. And a map was agreed and initialed in 1905.
I sort of started thinking about this of why should the U.S. care? And there are really three reasons, and you touched on two of them. The historic reasons is Foreign Secretary Greenidge mentioned the U.S. was indeed part of the original arbitration process. He might allege, I didn't say he did, but he might say we were on the wrong side. But we had our reasons for being on the side of Venezuela, and it had a lot to do with Monroe Doctrine and big stick diplomacy and other reasons. I would say a very important part of this, and a reason why it matters historically, is if this arbitration were to be deemed nullified or not valid, there are so many other arbitrations in the world that have happened since then. What about them? Are we going to open every one of those up? And could some of those be nullified? And ever since the Monroe Doctrine of 1823, the U.S. has been very concerned about security in the region, sometimes for very good reasons, sometimes for less than good reasons, but nonetheless, security in this region is important to us. U.S. investment in Guyana is huge. In 2018, which are the latest numbers I could find, it was 1.18 billion US dollars. Stability is very important for foreign direct investment. Now, I have to admit, not all companies are scared off by what's going on over this controversy. My own company, Guyana Goldfields, we're out there still working. Once the land border is resolved, as Carl mentioned, then in theory, maritime borders are determined by land borders. And then you're going to be able to maybe do more exploration in the maritime sector. Right now, no one is out there exploring in those blocks, which are in theory in the areas that Venezuela claims as their own, because there's uncertainty and that who wants to invest their money to have it only taken away from them. So again, resolution will mean more investment for Guyana. And if Guyana is prosperous and democratic, that is also better for the US. So I think those are the reasons why the US cares about this controversy.
Mount Roraima, for example, which is something we all grew up with. The mysteries are born in the land of the mighty Roraima. Mount Roraima is 65 square miles, and it is divided between Venezuela, Guyana, and Brazil. And there's a trilateral marker on Mount Roraima, which I went and I planted a flag on Mount Roraima for our 30th anniversary of our independence. As pilots, we fly there, and we for landing, a lot of times we may have to fly over into Venezuelan airspace to land in Guyana.
I have a question from Luis Nunes, who is an attendee, who states that you indicate that in 1900, there was a joint and peaceful delimitation between Guyana and Venezuela. But a little bit controversial, can it be called peaceful to have British warships anchored off the coast of Venezuela while threatening to accept this delimitation?
Mr. Foreign Secretary?
Yes. If that is directed to me, I would say that no, it can't be called peaceful. But Mr. has allowed his imagination to run riot. The arbitral award was completed in 1899. I'm not aware that any British warships were hovering there threatening Venezuela. In 1905, the maps were agreed by the two sides. I would want to say to you that the first attempts and the first exploration in Venezuela to yield oil came as a product of concessions granted to British firms. We can have a useful debate on matters that are contentious, but the debate would not be terribly useful if people generate fictitious events. There's a question here, if I might read it to you, that has come from a Mr. Ramirez. And again, once again, it deems to be a very authoritative comment. It says the controversy is about the frontier, not about null and void, arbitral award of 1899. UK, British, Guyana, and Venezuela signed Geneva Agreement in order to seek an amicable and practical solution. I have actually no idea. What I can say to Mr. Ramirez is that the Venezuelan contention is that the arbitral award of 1899 is null and void. And therefore, Guyana and Guyana's boundaries have to be revisited. I would like to say that that is the Venezuelan contention. That is what attracted the attention of the Secretary General, and that is what he's been working on. As regards the Geneva Agreement, the Geneva Agreement was an agreement, or is an agreement, which is of the controversy. What is the controversy? The controversy is that the award is null and void. So to state so definitively that the award is about the frontier is, to me, not a very helpful basis for dialogue. The point that's important here is that people are interested in resolving this problem. I have no doubt as to the good intent of the questioner, for example. The Geneva Agreement is a short agreement. It makes no reference to the transfer of land. It makes no reference to the Esequibo. The Esequibo is not even mentioned in the Geneva Agreement. It makes no reference to the movement of borders.
I think I saw something from Mike Singh asking about the possibility of a U.S. military, saying we need a U.S. military base in Guyana.
And I would say to you that I think the Guyana government, and certainly I can't speak for the Guyana government, but as a Guyanese and a person who's been involved, I would say that, and we are a friend of the United States, that certainly Guyana should consider it.
Mr. Foreign Secretary, this might be a question for you. It comes from an NGO that said its name is Mapa. Do you believe that the judicial solution is practical and satisfactory as indicated by the Geneva Agreement? I don't know that I quite understand that, but I thought do you want me to repeat?
No, I can venture a response. First of all, I'm glad that they say that MIMAPA is an NGO. So I'm glad for the response. Secondly, the reference to a practical and satisfactory solution is one that formed part of the discussions involving the signatories to the Geneva Agreement. But if a matter is to be solved between 2 or 3 parties that are, if you like, in dispute, you need to think very carefully about wording. Can it be that when this wording, which actually I think we have in Article 1 of the Geneva Agreement, it's a general intent, okay? You're saying to me, Venezuela and Guyana must arrive at a satisfactory solution, a solution satisfactory to both sides. But you know, the very fact that arbitration, conciliation, and other modalities are mentioned, more than one, recognizes that it is possible that no solution or no reasonable solution will find favor with the two sides at the same time. For that reason, therefore, the agreement beyond Article 1 makes no reference, but there's nothing in the agreement that says this problem cannot be resolved unless it is with Venezuela's agreement. You understand that you have two parties. There are two parties involved. Compromise is a feature of any dispute resolution. You cannot resolve a dispute if both sides stand where they began. Otherwise, resolution does not exist except by military means or force. Neither party is entitled to try and occupy the territory which they started to dispute, which they had control of at the beginning of the dispute. And that is why you will find no mention of the Esequibo. A satisfactory solution, as far as we could see in the discussions with Venezuela over the years, can only be a solution that gives to Venezuela what it could not achieve in 1899, that gives it the Esequibo, a space that it has never occupied. It never occupied it before 1648 because it wasn't in existence. It never occupied it after 1648. Spain never claims to, and now never claimed to have occupied it after 1648. And this is a figment of the imagination of the Venezuelan administration post 1821, or indeed post 1840s. It is a unique case of a country laying claim to territory which it actually never, over which it never exercised sovereignty. When you say that we must agree to an arrangement that is satisfactory to both sides, it is not a solution. That is not a solution, Mr. Nunes. And the cry, the flag that Mapa uses claims that the Venezuelan sun rises in the Esequibo, clearly is not a device for resolving this problem.
But Cardis is...
That is my response. The court pronounces on the substance, we will not continue in a situation where Venezuela could go around the back to a country, tell an ambassador, whisper to a minister, go and misrepresent situation to a trade union, saying, you know something, there was an agreement between Guyana and Venezuela that Guyana would not develop the Esequibo. There was an agreement signed by Guyana in 1966 that said the 1899 agreement was null and void. They cannot do that. They will not be able to do that because the court will have pronounced nothing has happened since 1899 to make the agreement null and void. And what is more, Guyana is entitled to the rights of a coastal state. Guyana has the longest, between ourselves and Venezuela, we have the longer Atlantic coast. We have no Caribbean coast. Venezuela has a Caribbean coast. It has no Atlantic coast of significance, and yet is claiming most of our EEZ. And this is the last point I want to make, and I was hinting at in my comments that Guyana, and I see a note here from it, maybe from Mr. Nunes, I'm not sure, which is saying, look at the civil organizations, civil society in Venezuela. Civil society is united in defense of the rights of Venezuela to the effect that the Esequibo belongs to Venezuela. And in Guyana, civil society doesn't seem to either have that conviction or to believe that it has a role. In other words, as he put it, leaves it as a matter only for experts. Well, that is his perception. Certainly Venezuela has gone even to the trouble of talking to the trade unions organizing at a trade union event in Brazil a resolution calling upon, which seemed to support the Venezuelan case. We've seen this on a number of fora. We recognize that Venezuela has invested a lot of money in misrepresenting to its public and its civil society the historical circumstances, so that people, yes, many people do believe far more believe now than they did in the 1940s that this territory was Venezuelan.
But Carl, I want to give you this assurance. The person or people who claim that Guyana civil society is somehow lax in this matter, I want to reassure you that they have not tested the resolve of the Guyana civil society. Because the Guyana civil society stands 100% in shoulder to shoulder with every Guyanese, with our government, with our military, that we will defend Guyana and our territorial integrity 100%. There's no lacking of resolve in the commitment of Guyana civil society. And as a leader of the private sector of Guyana, I will say that to you very, very strongly and publicly.
Thank you all so very much. I think you're mute, Mr. Greenidge. We can't hear you.
I think he's gone, Wesley.
Mr. Greenidge has left.
Okay.
Mi mapa de Venezuela incluye nuestro Esequibo.